The sky burned red as Dr. Elias Thorne stumbled out of his damaged shuttle, coughing through the choking smoke. The canyon before him yawned like a scar across the planet's surface, jagged cliffs hiding something unseen. From deep inside, a sound cut through the ash, sharp, high-pitched, and full of fear. Then another and another until the air itself seemed to shiver with it. Elias froze. His pulse thundered in his ears, but his mind raced faster. He had trained for dangerous worlds, for unknown pathogens, for impossible situations. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer terror in those cries. Across the canyon floor, small figures darted like shadows. Black scales glimmered faintly in the dying light, and tiny eyes glowed green. Dragon orphans, he realized, smaller than any adult dragon he had seen in the Hollywood records, but moving with an unnatural speed and coordination. A sudden hiss and a spray of toxic spores erupted from one of the orphans. The air turned sharp and bitter, burning his lungs. A hovering med-drone beside him wobbled, sparks flying before collapsing. Villagers, he hadn't even noticed they were here, screamed and fled, tumbling over rocks. Panic rippled through the canyon, and the dragon's wails rose, shrill and almost human in their despair. Elias didn't hesitate. He dove toward a young child pinned under a fallen boulder, coughing and choking. His hands burned from the spores, but he dragged the child to safety, shielding them with his body. One small orphan froze, tilting its head, watching him carefully. Its glow dimmed and brightened in irregular pulses, as if measuring his intent. Elias felt a strange tug in his chest. This one was different. "Easy. I won't hurt you," he whispered, though he knew it could not understand. Yet, somehow, the orphan seemed to sense something in his voice. It inched forward, claws scraping the stone, then froze again as another dragon hissed and flared its wings. The canyon erupted into chaos. Rocks tumbled. Smoke swirled. The orphans scattered, striking anyone who came too close. Elias forced himself to breathe. He needed information fast. The villagers' fear was tangible. They were as helpless as the humans in his quarantine simulations back on Earth. But unlike simulations, this was real. He saw another orphan cornered near a jagged cliff edge, its back trembling with fear. Without thinking, Elias sprinted toward it. A spore cloud burst from the orphan's mouth as he reached it. He grabbed a metal panel from his shuttle, held it like a shield, and pushed the spore back, coughing violently. The orphan froze, eyes wide. For a brief moment, they were both still, staring at each other across a haze of toxic mist. Then the orphan did something unexpected. It crouched low, letting out a soft, almost human-like whine. Elias didn't move. He extended his hand slowly. His gloved fingers trembled. The orphan's head tilted curiously. A small, sharp claw reached out, brushing his glove. Elias felt a flicker of hope. The impossible was happening. Trust, tiny and fragile, was being offered. But the canyon was not done. From the shadows of the cliffs above, something large moved. A spike of instinct told Elias it wasn't just another orphan. The air shifted. A deep, low growl rolled through the canyon, and a larger silhouette emerged, black scales catching the red light. Its eyes, bright green and intelligent, fixed on him. The smaller orphan pressed against his leg, shivering. He could feel its heartbeat pounding in sync with his own. Elias's mind raced. If the larger dragon attacked, he couldn't protect the villagers or the orphans. Yet he couldn't leave the frightened creature alone either. He had a choice: retreat and risk losing all trust, or step closer and face whatever came next. His decision came instinctively. Humans survived by acting, by courage, by refusing to freeze when the odds were impossible. He straightened, heart hammering, and spoke again, louder this time. "I'm not your enemy. I can help." The larger dragon paused. Its growl softened, but its body remained tense, wings partially spread. Around him, the smaller orphans began to gather cautiously, their toxic hisses lowering. Elias could feel a fragile connection forming, a bridge of understanding built on courage and empathy. Then a sudden tremor shook the canyon floor. Dust and rock rained down. One of the cliffs cracked, and a massive boulder began sliding straight toward the small orphan huddled by his leg. Time slowed. Elias lunged, throwing himself between the boulder and the orphan. Sparks of rock sprayed across his body as he pushed with every ounce of strength he had. The boulder stopped, balanced precariously before tumbling harmlessly aside. The orphan squeaked, pressed its head against his chest, and the larger dragon's eyes narrowed, watching, almost measuring him. Elias took a deep breath, covered in dust and sweat, feeling the strange warmth of trust from the tiny creature against him. He had survived the first onslaught. He had made contact. He had a chance. But above the canyon rim, movement stirred. Something else was coming. Bigger, faster, and far more dangerous than anything he had faced so far. And Elias realized with a sharp pang of fear that this was only the beginning. The dragon's eyes turned toward the shadow. A hiss filled the air, low and warning. And then, a roar unlike anything he had ever heard echoed across the canyon, shaking the ground beneath his feet. Elias tightened his jaw. He had no choice. He had to act. And the orphans were counting on him. The shadow above the canyon grew larger, blotting out the blood-red sky. Elias felt a gust of wind as the massive wings sliced the air, whipping dust and ash around him. The orphans pressed close, trembling. The largest of them, the one that had watched him so carefully, hissed a warning, but it was too late. A creature landed with a thunderous crash on the canyon floor. A plague dragon far larger than any of the orphans, scales black as obsidian, eyes like molten emerald. Its presence alone made the ground vibrate. Elias's heart pounded, but his mind worked faster. He had no weapons. No shield strong enough to stop a dragon of that size. But he had something far more valuable. His intelligence, his courage, and his understanding of life. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, hands raised, trying to show calm and control. "Easy. I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice steady despite the roar that shook his ribs. The dragon hissed, smoke curling from its nostrils, and the smaller orphans scrambled behind him. One of the villagers shrieked and fell backward over a rock, coughing violently. Toxic spores had spread further than Elias realized. He grabbed the child, shielding them with his body as the larger dragon flexed its wings and lunged. Elias dodged, rolling to the side. The movement was quick, instinctual. He grabbed a fallen metal panel and held it like a shield, but the dragon's claw scraped the edge, sending sparks flying. Elias's teeth clenched. He could not afford hesitation. Every second counted. From the corner of his eye, he saw the smaller orphan, its glowing eyes fixed on him, unafraid now. A strange bond had begun to form, and he realized that if he could reach the smaller dragons, maybe he could influence the larger one too. He needed to act and fast. He shouted toward the largest dragon, trying a different tactic. "Watch me. I can help your friends." He grabbed a handful of dust and flung it into the air, using it as a distraction. The dragon hissed and swiped, narrowly missing him, but it faltered for a moment, confused. That was all he needed. He darted toward the orphans, crouching low, reaching out with his gloved hand. One of the smallest hesitated, then stepped forward, brushing its claw against his arm. Another followed. Elias felt hope ignite. If he could gain their trust fully, maybe the larger dragon would follow. Suddenly, a tremor ran through the canyon. The cliffs above groaned and dust rained down. Elias froze. A section of rock dislodged, tumbling straight toward a group of villagers who had frozen in fear. Without hesitation, he sprinted, throwing himself between the boulder and the humans. He pushed with every ounce of strength, barely redirecting it so it rolled harmlessly past. The villagers scrambled back, eyes wide, mouths open in awe and terror. The large dragon's roar shook the air, but it hesitated, watching Elias. He felt the weight of their attention. One misstep and he could be crushed, poisoned, or worse. Yet he could not retreat. Not when the orphans depended on him. He scanned the area and spotted a narrow ledge along the canyon wall. The smaller orphans were huddled there, quivering. If he could lead them up, he might gain higher ground, forcing the larger dragon to reconsider its attack. Elias shouted, "Follow me. This way, quick." The dragons, surprisingly, obeyed. They jumped, scrambled, and flitted after him. His heart pounded in unison with theirs. The climb was treacherous. Loose rocks slid underfoot. Elias's gloved hands were cut and scraped as he grabbed jagged edges. Behind him, the large dragon shifted, testing the limits of the cliffside. Dust and debris tumbled around them. He could feel the heat of its gaze, the weight of its power. But with every step, every careful move, Elias was guiding the orphans, shielding them from the worst of the danger. Halfway up, one orphan froze, eyes wide. Below, a spore cloud expanded from the canyon floor, moving toward them faster than expected. Elias realized the spores were heavier than he thought. They clung to every surface, including his clothes and hair. Coughing, he grabbed the orphan's clawed hand and urged it forward. "We can do this. Keep moving." His voice cracked, but determination drove him upward. At the top of the ledge, Elias paused, finally out of immediate reach of the cloud. The orphans huddled against him, trembling but alive. He patted the largest one gently, trying to convey reassurance. For a moment, there was silence except for the soft hiss of the smaller dragons. Elias took a deep breath. The micro payoff, they had survived the immediate danger together. His courage had kept them safe. But the relief was brief. From the shadows of the cliff above, movement stirred again. Not the large dragon, they had seen that, but something faster, slithering and unseen. Elias could sense it rather than see it. The air shifted, carrying a scent sharp and alien. One of the orphans stiffened, ears twitching. Another hissed softly. Elias's stomach dropped. He realized the plague might not be the only threat. Something else lurked, something intelligent and patient. The toxic spores, the panicked villagers, the dragons, they were only part of the danger. And now, whatever had been watching from the cliffs was about to make itself known. Elias tightened his jaw. He had survived the first attack, earned the orphans' trust, and protected the villagers. Yet he knew instinctively that the hardest part was still ahead. A faint, metallic clink echoed from above, and one of the smaller orphans hissed sharply. Elias's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer to shield the group. Whatever came next, it was coming for them, and it would test every ounce of his courage, intelligence, and determination. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. And from the darkness above, a shadow detached itself from the rock. Larger than any orphan, faster than the wind, and moving with deadly intent. Elias exhaled slowly, heart hammering. He had no weapons. No backup. Only his wits, his will, and the fragile trust of the orphans at his side. And he knew with certainty that failure was not an option. Elias's muscles tensed as the shadow moved above him. His eyes scanned the cliffside, heart hammering. The smaller orphans pressed close, trembling, their glowing eyes reflecting his own fear and determination. He had protected them through the first attacks, but this was something else entirely. Something intelligent, patient, and lethal. Suddenly the shadow lunged. A long, serpentine figure dropped from the cliff, scales glinting like black glass. Its eyes burned with a clever, calculating intelligence that made Elias step back instinctively. This wasn't a random predator, it was studying him, testing him. Behind it, smaller dragons scattered, hissing in fear. The air thickened with spores and tension. Elias raised his hands slowly, speaking calmly, "I'm not here to fight you. I want to help." His voice was firm, controlled. The large serpent paused midair, mid-leap, tilting its head as if understanding, or at least considering, his words. The smaller orphans edged closer, emboldened by his courage. Then the cliff gave way slightly above, revealing a narrow tunnel carved into the rock. A faint green glow pulsed from inside. The large serpent hesitated at the entrance, glancing back at Elias, then slithered toward it. Curiosity prickled at him. That glow, it wasn't natural. He had to investigate. "Stay here," Elias whispered, though he didn't move. The orphans pressed against him, reluctant but obedient. With a deep breath, he followed the serpent into the tunnel, careful not to alarm it. The walls were slick with bioluminescent moss, glowing faintly in rhythm with the dragon's green eyes. The air was warmer here, humid, and carried the faintest scent of something metallic. His pulse quickened, not with fear but with the thrill of discovery. The tunnel opened into a hidden cavern. Elias's jaw dropped. Eggs, hundreds of them, lay scattered across the ground, pulsing faintly with green light. Some were cracked. Small black-scaled orphans peeked out, chirping softly. The source of the plague he realized could be here. And the dragon's immunity, this might be the key. The large serpent coiled at the entrance, watching him carefully, almost guarding the space. Elias approached slowly, crouching to inspect one of the eggs. A faint vapor escaped from a small crack, carrying a virus-like particle that shimmered in the glow. He made a mental note. These eggs contained a mutation making the dragons immune, but the spores released could infect humans. He had discovered the origin of the plague, and potentially its cure. A sudden noise made him whirl around. Another passage opened and more small dragons emerged, hissing and chittering in alarm. One of the orphans from the canyon ran to him, brushing against his leg. It was the same one that had first trusted him. Elias knelt, letting it press close. For a moment he allowed himself a small smile. He had gained their trust, and it felt like a victory amid the chaos. But the relief was brief. From deeper in the cavern, a low rumble shook the walls. Dust and tiny stones fell from the ceiling. The large serpent hissed sharply, wings partially unfurling. Elias realized with a pang that the cavern was unstable. One wrong move could collapse the chamber entirely. He had to act fast. Using a portable analyzer, he began scanning the eggs and the surrounding spores, taking samples carefully. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. One misstep and the dragons could panic or the cavern could crumble. His hands were steady despite the sweat, the fear, and the urgency. He worked quickly, trying to extract enough information to develop a serum that could protect humans from the plague. Suddenly one of the cracked eggs moved. A tiny dragon hatchling emerged, black scales slick with moisture, green eyes wide and intelligent. It blinked up at Elias and chirped softly. The other orphans followed its lead, huddling around him. He extended a gloved hand, letting the hatchling sniff and touch it. The micro-payoff, the smallest life had accepted him as a protector. But then the rumble grew louder. From the shadows of the cavern, a second, larger creature appeared. Not just a plague dragon but one unlike the others, scales rougher, longer claws, eyes burning with hostility. It had been watching, waiting. Elias froze, understanding instantly. If it attacked, the entire cavern could collapse and all the dragons could be lost. Thinking fast, Elias grabbed a small vial of distilled water from his kit. He threw it at the cavern wall near the creature. The splash echoed through the space, startling it, giving him a moment to step forward with calm, deliberate movements. "I only want to help," he said again, voice firm but gentle. The creature hissed, then stopped, eyes narrowing in evaluation. Elias's heart raced. He had survived by reading the creature's behavior and responding with courage and intelligence rather than brute force. The large serpent at the entrance shifted, wings brushing the moss, and let out a long, low hiss that seemed to communicate with the intruder. Miraculously, the hostile creature backed down slightly, though tension remained high. Elias realized he had bought himself a small window to work. He knelt beside the eggs again, carefully extracting a small sample of the green-tinged virus particles. One of the orphans curled against his side, trembling but not retreating. His mind raced. This sample could be the breakthrough humanity needed. The cure for the plague might come from these very dragons, creatures feared by all, now shown to be vital to survival. Then a shadow flickered across the cavern wall, too fast, too deliberate to be another dragon. Elias's stomach sank. Someone, or something, had followed him into the chamber. He froze, realizing immediately, the real danger wasn't just the dragons or the plague. It was whoever had tracked him here. He stood slowly, the sample secured. The dragon's eyes followed his every move. He had their trust, but now his intelligence and courage would be tested in a new way. Outside, the canyon waited, chaos still unfolding. And in the deep shadows of the cavern, unseen eyes watched his every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Elias took a deep breath. He had found the cure, gained the dragon's trust, and survived impossible odds, but the hardest choices were still ahead. And somewhere above, a new threat prepared to make itself known. Elias's pulse raced as he stepped back from the eggs, clutching the vial containing the sample that could save countless lives. The cavern trembled again, dust falling from the ceiling in tiny showers. The dragons, both the smaller orphans and the large serpent guarding the entrance, watched him closely, their glowing green eyes reflecting tension, fear, and something that almost resembled hope. But hope was fragile here. One wrong move and it would shatter completely. From the shadows deeper in the cavern, movement stirred. A sharp hiss cut through the air. Elias squinted. The intruder had revealed itself, a human figure, heavily armored, stepping carefully over the jagged floor. A scanner hung from its wrist, and its visor reflected the green glow from the eggs. Elias's stomach dropped. This was no casual explorer, it was someone hunting the dragons and likely willing to take them by force. Elias didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, placing himself between the intruder and the dragons. "Stop," he shouted. "They're not weapons. They're alive and they're intelligent." The intruder paused, tilting its head, calculating. Then it lifted a small device that emitted a faint hum. Toxic spores began to swirl. The cavern air thickened instantly, curling around Elias and the dragons. Adrenaline surged. Elias knew he couldn't run. The orphans huddled close, trembling but alert. He glanced at the eggs. If the intruder reached them, everything would be lost. The plague, the cure, and the dragons' lives. He had to act. Thinking fast, he grabbed a loose rock, swinging it toward the intruder's device. Sparks flew. The humming faltered, and the intruder cursed, stepping back. That small victory bought him seconds. Elias seized the moment. He motioned for the dragons. The smaller orphans hesitated, but the large serpent understood immediately. It lashed its tail, sending a cloud of glowing spores toward the intruder. The human flinched, coughing, stumbling backward. Elias's heart pounded. The moment of micro-payoff, the dragons were now fighting alongside him, not against him. But the intruder recovered quickly. With a sharp step, it advanced again, this time with calculated precision. Elias had no weapons except his hands, his courage, and the fragile trust of these creatures. He grabbed a thick, jagged shard of rock from the floor and charged. He dodged a swipe from the intruder, using the shard to knock the device aside. Sparks rained down. The intruder cursed again, now visibly frustrated and panicked. The smaller orphans began hissing loudly, circling the intruder and trying to block its path. Elias realized he could use their instincts to his advantage. Distract it. Keep it away from the eggs, he shouted. The dragons responded instantly, darting in and out, drawing the intruder's attention. Elias sprinted toward the sample vial he had set down, tucking it safely into his pack. Then a massive roar echoed through the cavern. The large serpent unfurled its wings, eyes locked on the intruder, and lunged. The human stumbled backward, barely avoiding the swipe of claws that could have torn through armor like paper. Elias felt a thrill of fear and exhilaration. Against impossible odds, he had orchestrated a defense where courage, intelligence, and empathy mattered more than weapons. The intruder, cornered and desperate, activated a small explosion near the cavern wall. Dust and rock tumbled around them, hitting Elias and sending him sprawling. He coughed violently, shielding himself and the orphans. One of the small dragons yelped, nearly panicking, but Elias reached out, calming it with a firm hand. "Stay with me. We're not leaving anyone behind." His voice carried authority, compassion, and unshakable resolve. Through the dust, he saw the intruder backing toward the cavern entrance, re-evaluating the fight. The dragons pressed forward, protective and relentless. Elias realized he had won a critical moment. The intruder had underestimated both human courage and the dragon's intelligence. Together they were more formidable than it could imagine. He sprinted toward the tunnel's exit, urging the smaller dragons to follow. The large serpent glided above, guiding them. Outside, the canyon stretched into chaos. Dust storms, spore clouds, and fleeing villagers. Elias glanced back. The intruder had retreated for now, but its gaze lingered. Whoever this was, they were not done. A small orphan brushed against his leg. Its eyes, wide and glowing, reflected gratitude and trust. Elias bent down, holding it close. He could feel its heartbeat sync with his own, fragile yet steady. The micro payoff. He had saved lives, earned trust, and faced danger head-on without succumbing to fear. Every choice, every risk had mattered. But then the wind shifted, carrying a new sound. Above the cliffs, something moved faster than any human or dragon should be able to. A shadow cut across the sky, blotting the red horizon. Elias's chest tightened. Another threat? Something bigger? The intruder had not been alone. They had likely called for reinforcements. Or worse. Elias straightened, holding the small orphan securely. His eyes scanned the horizon. Beyond the immediate victory, the real challenge was coming. His courage had carried him this far, but now he would need every ounce of intelligence, compassion, and resilience to survive what was next. He glanced at the dragons, his fragile team of allies, and whispered, "We're not done yet. Not by a long shot." The canyon seemed to hold its breath. And from the far cliffs, a new shadow moved with intent, unseen yet undeniably powerful. Elias clenched his fists. This fight was far from over. Elias stood at the edge of the canyon, the small orphan pressed against his chest, its glowing eyes flickering nervously. Behind him, the large serpent had landed gracefully, wings folding slowly as it watched over the smaller orphans. The dust had settled, the spore clouds had begun to thin, and the intruder had retreated, but the air still felt charged with tension. The battle had been won, but survival was never simple here. He knelt beside one of the smaller dragons, gently inspecting a shallow scratch on its flank. The creature hissed softly but didn't pull away. His trust in him was fragile but real. "It's okay," Elias whispered, pressing a cloth soaked in antiseptic against the wound. The tiny dragon shivered but allowed it, leaning into his hand. A micro payoff, a moment of calm in the chaos, proof that care could overcome fear. From the canyon floor, the villagers began to emerge, still wary, still trembling. Many had lost faith in their own courage, but seeing Elias survive and the dragons respond to him sparked a ripple of awe. One elder woman stepped forward, tears streaming down her dust-streaked face. You saved them," she said, voice shaking. "All of them." Elias nodded, glancing at the orphans who now clustered around him, some brushing against his legs, others circling curiously. The dragon's hisses were no longer sharp and defensive. They were softer, tentative, almost conversational. He had done more than protect them. He had earned their trust. But even as he exhaled a quiet sigh of relief, the shadow of the larger threat lingered in his mind. The intruder had been human, yes, but coordinated, intelligent, and ruthless. Elias knew this wasn't the end. Whoever had come here before would return, perhaps with weapons, perhaps with plans to exploit these dragons. Still, he had the upper hand. Using the samples from the eggs, he began improvising a containment solution for the plague spores, drawing upon his knowledge of virology and quick, creative thinking. The smaller dragons watched intently, their trust lending him courage. Each movement he made reinforced the fragile alliance he had built. He realized that human intelligence paired with empathy could solve problems that brute strength could not. He turned to the largest serpent, speaking slowly, deliberately. "I know you don't fully understand me yet, but I can help your kind. I can stop the plague and keep everyone safe. Will you trust me?" The dragon's eyes narrowed, bright green pools of intelligence and suspicion. Then, almost imperceptibly, it lowered its head. Elias felt a shiver of triumph. The first step had been taken. A bridge of understanding built on courage and compassion was forming between species. As he worked, he noticed something remarkable. The plague spores, while deadly to humans, were harmless to the dragons. In fact, their presence seemed to calm the creatures, stabilizing their glowing eyes and reducing their panic. Elias realized that the dragons weren't just immune, they were the key to controlling the outbreak. His mind raced with the possibilities. Humans could survive this plague, not by destroying the dragons, but by learning from them, cooperating with them, and respecting their intelligence. The villagers began assisting cautiously, moving supplies and helping treat minor injuries under Elias's guidance. Slowly, the canyon transformed from a scene of terror to one of organized survival. The micro-payoffs continued. A child handed him a water flask just as he was about to faint, a dragon nudged a fallen drone upright, sparks flying but functional. Every small success reinforced the idea that humans, when courageous and compassionate, could make impossible odds work in their favor. Then the wind shifted. From the cliffs above, the faint hum of movement caught Elias's attention. He glanced up. Shadows flickered across the rocks, faster than human or dragon. His pulse quickened. The intruder wasn't gone, they were scouting, planning. Elias's jaw tightened. The canyon might be safe for now, but the larger world would challenge them again. He had proven that humans could protect and inspire, but he also knew that vigilance was never-ending. Elias gathered the dragons closer. "We've made it this far," he whispered. "And we'll make it further. Together." The small orphans chirped in response, brushing against him. The large serpent lowered its wings completely, resting beside him, a silent guardian. The scene was a quiet victory, humans and dragons, bound by trust and courage, standing together in a world that feared them. Finally, Elias turned toward the village. Villagers looked at him differently now, not just with awe but with understanding. Courage, intelligence, and compassion had saved lives today. He had shown them that humans could shine in ways that brute force or fear could not. But even as he felt the warmth of success, the wind carried a subtle warning. Far above, in the canyon rim's shadows, new eyes watched. Humans, dragons, and the plague itself were all pieces of a larger puzzle that had yet to be solved. Elias's mind raced with possibilities and threats. The cure, the dragon's trust, the future. None of it would last without continued courage and intelligence. He lifted the small orphan to his shoulder, feeling its heartbeat against his own. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, voice steady. "And I won't fail." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the canyon. Somewhere beyond, a distant roar echoed, deeper, older, and stranger than anything Elias had faced. A new mystery had begun, promising danger, discovery, and the chance for humans to prove themselves once again. And in that moment, Elias understood something essential. Courage was contagious, intelligence was powerful, and compassion could change the world. He glanced at the dragons, then at the canyon, and whispered, "We'll face whatever comes next. Together." The shadows above shifted, unseen yet deliberate, hinting at the next adventure, the next challenge, the next chance for humanity to shine.